What's up, guys? Today's video is my first ever book review, and it's about a book called The Art of Language Invention, which is a linguistics book, and I think it's going to be really interesting to anyone who likes languages. Now, when you're reading this book, it doesn't feel like you're reading a linguistics textbook. It feels like you're in a conversation with a comedian who also happens to be really knowledgeable about languages, because it's so stinking funny, it's easy to understand, and it's also really informative at the same time. It's called The Art of Language Invention by David Peterson, and this book offers a really interesting perspective on linguistics because it was written by the guy who came up with the fictional languages for a lot of movies and TV shows like Game of Thrones. And the book is basically about the painstakingly detailed steps that he goes through in order to make his fictional languages behave and feel like real languages from the real world. And he details a bunch of things that conlangers can do to understand these principles in an easy to follow way. Now, I'm a linguistics major, and I can attest that everything in this book is valid linguistic theory. It's not just something that some nerdy conlanger came up out of his own brain. He describes actual phenomena that is attested in real linguistics, but he does so in such a way that really held my attention. And the first time I read this book was before I started studying linguistics at the university level, so I had no more knowledge than the average Joe. But he explains some deep linguistic principles in a way that anyone can understand. And my favorite example of this was his chapter on allophones. Now, the distinction between allophones and phonemes is a really abstract relationship. If you've ever taken an intro to linguistics course, you probably remember the week on allophones being this nightmarish section where just everything was totally abstract and nothing made sense. And you might remember your professor talking about how a phoneme is a type of abstract sound that's never actually pronounced. So it's not technically really a sound at all. It's more of a category of sounds that is in contrastive distribution with another category of sounds, which is made up of allophones, which are in complementary distribution with one another. And the only way you can tell if two sounds are allophones is if they're in complementary distribution, except for the case of the glottal fricative and the velar nasal, which basically proves that everything I just told you is a lie. So it doesn't make any sense. I've actually taken this book to school and used it to explain allophones to beginning linguistics students, because David does such a good job of making the information comprehensible. In the chapter about phonology, he compares phonemes to a guy named Tony. And like phonemes, Tony changes depending on his environment. In most environments, Tony is a human. But under the environment of a full moon, Tony becomes a wolf. But in all environments, he's still Tony. So we can say that the abstract identity of Tony can manifest itself in two different ways: Wolf Tony and Human Tony, where Wolf Tony exists only in the environment of a full moon, and Human Tony exists elsewhere, in every other environment. But importantly, we'll never find an environment where Tony exists as a wolf and a human at the same time. Now, I don't want to spend too much time in this video talking about phonemes. If you still don't understand, just read the book. David does a much better job of explaining this than I do. But it's enough to say that I've never taken a phonology class where they use werewolves to explain the difference between phonemes and allophones, even though this is the perfect metaphor. And this is also the perfect example of David's writing style. He makes it fun and easy to understand the information in a way that college courses just can't. Like I said, I read this book before I went back to school, and when I did arrive at the university, I remember my first semester taking a Linguistics 100 course, and it was in a huge lecture hall with hundreds of other undergrad students who were all racking their brains trying to figure out what was going on with this linguistics stuff. And I was one of the only students who actually understood everything that was going on, and I think a big part of it is because I was so well prepared just from reading this book. So if you're at all interested in linguistics, or if you think you might ever take a linguistics course someday, I highly recommend The Art of Language Invention by David Peterson. I picked this up on Amazon for like $10 or something. I know it's $9.99 on Kindle. And I found this also on eBay. I think there's one on eBay right now for like $2.69. So if you hurry up and get that one, then you get a really good deal. But you can get a used paperback for super cheap, and I highly recommend it. The only thing I'm going to warn against is the Audible, or any audio version of the book, because there's just so many charts and graphs and stuff in here. A lot of pictures, a lot of script from other languages. In fact, there's a whole chapter that's just about written scripts and orthography. So you're not going to get the full experiments. You're not going to get the full experience if you get the Audible book or any audiobook version. But other than that disclaimer, I cannot recommend this book enough, especially if you think you might ever have an interest in conlanging or constructed languages in any capacity. When I started reading this book for the first time, I had absolutely no interest in the conlanging community. I just wanted to learn about the linguistic theory that was inside the book. But after making it all the way through, it kind of opened my eyes to the really vibrant community and all kinds of different conlangs that exist out there. And it's really interesting. It got me kind of hooked on the idea. And even if you have no interest in conlanging, but you're just interested in real world languages, there's still a wealth of information in this book because he tries to make his conlangs as close to real world languages as possible. And it'll open up your minds to the depth and width of the bizarre things that real world languages do. Even your own native language, which there's probably a ton of things that you never noticed about your language, but when you stop and think about it or read about it, you start to realize that this is a really weird way of saying this stuff that I have just always felt is totally normal because I grew up speaking this language. So that's where I'm going to end the video. I hope you guys liked it, and I hope you guys go out and buy the book, and I'll see you all next week.